This is why a garrison was put here. This is why fortifications were built here. Barbed wire, barricades, trenches, guardhouses. That's why this stuff was put here. It wasn't about the Germans. It was about the Soviets. I'm standing at the site of the first battle of the German invasion of Poland in 1939 to kick off the European part of World War II. Okay, many historians consider this the opening salvo of the war. Westerplatte, the peninsula of Westerplatte, which connects to Gdańsk. To understand what's going on here in the moments leading up to that battle, to understand the context of that battle, we actually have to go back centuries. See, if you were to come here to Gdańsk and to the Pomorze, to Pomerania, in the centuries before this battle, even going back 800 or 900 years, you would have found this region controlled by and inhabited by a wide variety of peoples. At various times you would have found local Poles and Slavic peoples, you would have found Prussians, you would have found pagans, you would have found Christians, found Polish dukes and kings in control of this area. You would have found Teutonic knights from Germany in control of this area. Of course, the Poles controlled it for a long time, and then we have the partitions of Poland in the late 18th century, after which this area is controlled officially by Prussia. Of course, Prussia has roots in the Prussian state created by the German Teutonic knights, so that's a history going back centuries before that. But then we got Prussia controlling this area, and then the German Empire controlling this area, and all the while there's this great port, the jewel of the Eastern Baltic, and that is Gdańsk, or Danzig. The Germans would have called it Danzig, and it developed into a German majority, heavy German majority city. So in essence, you have a German city here, Danzig. But then World War I happens, and Germany loses. And it's not a stalemate or anything, it's a straight up loss. And in war, when you have a straight up loser, the winners, the victors, can decide, if they wish, to punish the loser. Okay, there aren't so much negotiations as punishment, punitive actions enshrined in treaties. And that's what we see at the end of World War I. The Versailles Treaty punishes Germany, and among other things, like reparations and admitting war guilt and whatnot, Germany is punished by having much of its territory stripped away. New states are created, often for the benefit of peoples who haven't had their own nation states in a long time. Their lands have been subsumed in bigger empires before the war. Well, now that the war's over, we see states like Czechoslovakia and states like Poland emerge, and the question is, where will their boundaries be? Where is Poland? Where does it begin and end? And when that question comes up in the context of the end of World War I and a guilty Germany, well, often that question falls on the side of punishing Germany. And so we see a lot of territory stripped from Germany, territory in which millions of Germans live. Okay, now others live there too, but millions of Germans live. In the case of Poland, we see much of what will be called Western Poland used to be Eastern Germany, and it's inhabited by millions of Germans. The Polish corridor is created to connect the new state of Poland to the sea, the Baltic, and Danzig, the great German city there on the Baltic coast, is made the Free State of Danzig, a city-state, technically under the protection of the League, but if any country can be said to control Danzig, it's Poland. Poland is allowed free use of the port. Poland is allowed from the 1920s on to establish a military post right here at Westerplatte, where I am, with a garrison and guardhouses and ammunition depot and entrenchments and barricades and things like that. They run a post office, armed and protected, in the city. They regulate the railways. On the international stage, they represent Danzig. And so the Free City of Danzig is independent, yes, but also somewhat controlled in practical terms by Poland. Anyway, it's surrounded by Poland. You've got the Polish corridor, you've got Westerplatte on the north looking down. The Germans are going to make use of this because of course, the vast German majority population of Danzig, it does not like this situation. It resents Poland, and during the 20s and the 30s, we'll see the German population is quite anti-Poland, quite pro-Germany. The Nazi Party will have great success early on in Danzig, starting in the early 30s. By the mid-30s, the Nazi Party controls Danzig, has banned other parties, and we see the initiation of anti-Polish and anti-Jewish actions on the part of the Nazi Party of Danzig. And so that's the situation. It's not that Gdańsk is a Polish city being invaded by the Germans. It's muddier than that. It's more complicated than that. We have a German majority city that has voted itself into Nazi control, and a lonely Polish outpost, military outpost here at Westerplatte, north of the city, sort of guarding the gates to Danzig as well as to the Polish corridor. But it wasn't just the free city of Danzig that was a thorn in the Poles' side, or the German threat that loomed, which is very real, and I'll come back to the German threat in a second. Because of course, by the eve of the Battle of Westerplatte, that threat was extremely real and serious. So I'll get back to that in a second. But there was also the threat from the east, from the Soviet side. If you go back to the end of World War I, after World War I, Poland pushed deep towards the Soviet Union, then got pushed back, and the Soviet Union almost snuffed out Poland, a couple of years after it had been restored to the map. The Soviet Union almost took the country, but then the Soviets were pushed back. But that threat of an invasion by the USSR loomed for years and years. And if you fast forward to the late 30s, 1937, 1938, okay, so we're talking right before World War II begins, what is Stalin doing in the USSR? He's liquidating entire minority groups. He's ethnic cleansing, and no group was targeted more vociferously than the Poles. Just between 1937 and 1938, something like 200,000 Poles are murdered in the USSR by Stalin. 200,000, mostly by firing squad. And the tens of thousands that weren't murdered but were arrested were hauled off to labor camps in Siberia. Okay, so that's the threat from the east. It's very real. It's obviously very anti-Polish, and it's right there. In fact, it was the Soviet threat that was the main reason that a military post was built here at Westerplatte in the first place. This is why a garrison was put here. This is why fortifications were built here. Barbed wire, barricades, trenches, guardhouses. That's why this stuff was put here. It wasn't about the Germans. It was about the Soviets. In fact, despite the liquidations happening in the Soviet Union, any other time that would be your most imminent threat, would be from the east if that's going on. But tells you the situation of Poland when that was not the most imminent threat of the time, believe it or not. The most imminent threat came from the west, from Germany. In 1935, Hitler had reintroduced universal military service. In 1936, he demilitarized the Rhineland. Then in 1938, he'd begun his annexations, annexed Austria, and then the Sudetenland, where millions of Germans lived. And then he annexed Czech lands. Then he annexed the slice of territory that Lithuania controlled. And many Poles were worried that they were next. Their Polish corridor was next. Danzig was next. They were worried that a Nazi-inspired coup in the free city of Danzig might lead to the next annexation. In fact, Germany had made demands of Poland too. These were not baseless fears. Forget the fact that in Danzig itself, the Nazis had established a 1,500-man police force, that they controlled. So should there be an invasion, at least here in Danzig and in this region, they would control essentially the military force of the city. They could use that had that at their disposal. But Hitler had already made specific demands of Poland. In October of 1938, Hitler had demanded that Poland give to Germany Danzig, give it up. Besides that, he demanded a roadway and a railway across the Polish corridor, linking East Prussia with the rest of Germany. Okay, that one, not so crazy a demand in many ways. Anytime you have a bifurcated country, it'd be great if you could join them up somehow. But he demanded that. He demanded the city. He demanded control of Poland's foreign policy. And these are things that, of course, Poland could not give up. And by May of the next year, 1939, so keep that timeline in your head, this is just a few months before the Battle of Westerplatte. So this is critical context. Poland responded aggressively by saying, no way, no way. Poland will not be cut off from the sea. That cannot happen. We're not giving you any of these demands. Okay, so this gives Hitler sort of the pretext, or maybe less cynically, a reason to invade Poland. These demands have not been met. And for Hitler, this is sort of a new thing, because all of his annexations up till now have been unopposed. He's been able to essentially just march right in. Even other Western powers have not put up any meaningful resistance. Poland was really the first to straight up oppose Germany's expansion. So this is new for Hitler, and it's probably when Hitler decided he was going to obliterate Polish statehood. Okay, in fact, this is the context behind which we see secret meetings taking place between the Russians and the Nazis. Ribbentrop for the German side, Molotov on the Russian side, they have their secret negotiations and discussions, and what comes out of it is the secret pact between Germany and the USSR, where essentially they decide how they're going to divide up the whole region between themselves. You know, the USSR will invade from the east, and they'll end up with, according to the agreement, they'll get Finland and Estonia and Latvia and eastern Poland and eastern Romania. And the Germans will get western Poland and Lithuania. So that's the agreement. Well, German propaganda portrayed the Polish position as incredibly threatening to Danzig. On their propaganda posters, there'd be these big brick walls with barbed wire or whatever, marking the edge of the Polish corridor with menacing-looking Polish troops, their guns pointed down at the little city. And then north of the city, there was the Westerplatte military outpost with Polish troops menacingly pointing their guns at the little city. So it's like this beleaguered Danzig, this beleaguered German city surrounded by menacing Poles. That was the propaganda. Well, in the days leading up to the battle, on the 25th of August, a German battleship, the Schleswig-Holstein, aptly named, if you know anything about the history of the German Wars of Unification, it's apt that a ship of that name is here at this time. But anyway, the Schleswig-Holstein is here. This is a battleship carrying 225 Marine shock troops, and actually, the battleship was just down here in Danzig Harbor, down this corridor here, and anchored about 160 yards off the Westerplatte Peninsula. Now, the military post here had recently been fortified for all these reasons we've been discussing. And essentially, the whole purpose of this thing is to hold out. This is a holdout. Hold out until reinforcements can arrive. Okay? It was never intended to hold out for days or weeks or years or whatever, or to be permanent. In case of an attack, this was meant to hold out long enough for more Polish reinforcements to arrive. And so, you've got barracks with reinforced cement structure, including a basement in the middle, and then you've got guard houses built around that, and then you have 4 sort of entrenched outposts strategically located around the peninsula outside of that. So 3 lines of defense. If the outposts fall, you fall back to the guardhouses. If the guardhouses fall, you fall back to the barracks, some of those central buildings. And you only have to last 12 hours, then reinforcements will be here. Okay, so that's sort of the Polish position and the Polish plan. Reinforced, refortified in the years, months, and days leading up to the battle. On the German side, the Germans are so confident in themselves. They think they're going to be able to take over the Westerplatte position in minutes. 10 minutes. If not minutes, at worst, maybe a few hours. Well, on the 1st of September, 1939, the Germans began their bombardment. The idea was to bombard the Poles, soften them up that way, and then move in on land and finish the job. And that's what they did. They bombarded the Poles, the Polish position here at Westerplatte, and then the Marines moved in on the western side of the island, or the peninsula, down on this side. And then a force from Danzig actually invaded Westerplatte from this side. I'm on the eastern side of the peninsula right now. And they were thrown back on both sides. They were thrown back. And they tried multiple times to assault the Polish position, thrown back each time. And by the end of the day, the Poles still controlled Westerplatte. 12 hours had come and gone. No reinforcements had arrived. I'm sure the Poles were angry about that. Both sides may be surprised at the outcome, but the Poles held their position. And Radio Poland, public broadcasting service, Radio Polskie, could broadcast at the end of the day, Westerplatte broni się jeszcze. Westerplatte is still fighting. On this same day, by the way, September 1st, the Germans began to hit Polish positions in Danzig itself. Most famously, the Polish post office, which was defended vigorously, but eventually taken, burned down, and the 50 or so defenders captured and executed. Then comes day 2, September 2nd, 1939. And this day must have been something of a hell for the soldiers stationed here, because the bombardment was just so aggressive and never ending. You had bombardment from the sea, from the battleship, and elsewhere. You had bombardment from the land, from field artillery. There were even 60 dive bombers that the Germans sent against this position, dropping bombs from the sky. So relentless. Fortifications here damaged, destroyed, 8 to 10 Polish soldiers killed. There's evidence that the commanding officer here was shell-shocked and that the second in command had to take over, maybe for the rest of the time. There's some evidence that a small handful of Polish soldiers tried to desert and then were executed as deserters by their fellow soldiers. So really nightmarish stuff. But by the end of the day, the Poles still controlled their position here at Westerplatte. And Radio Poland could continue to broadcast Westerplatte broni się jeszcze. Day 2, by the way, was the day that Danzig was officially annexed by Germany. So Westerplatte is fighting very isolated now. The free city of Danzig now annexed by the Germans. Well, day 3, the bombardment continues. This is the day that France and Britain declare war on Germany, though that didn't really help Poland in the moment. But at the end of the day, Radio Poland is still broadcasting Westerplatte broni się jeszcze. Day 4, same thing. The bombardment continues. In fact, day 4, there's a surprise attack by a German torpedo boat. But by the end of the day, the Poles are still here, holding their position. No reinforcements. No, end of day 4, no reinforcements, but Polish radio broadcasts yet again, Westerplatte broni się jeszcze. By day 5, so 5th of September, the Poles have been holding the position more than 10 times longer than they'd been initially expected to hold it, and still no reinforcements. And so the Poles begin to talk amongst themselves about surrender. They discuss this. They decide they're going to hold their position just a little bit longer and see what happens. Well, the Germans on day 5 try a different tack. They send in a couple fire trains, but this fails as well. And by the end of day 5, Radio Poland can still broadcast that Westerplatte broni się jeszcze. Well, by the 6th of September, day 6, the Poles are running out of supplies. Clearly, no reinforcements are coming. And they're looking around at their wounded, their injured, and the wounds of the injured are becoming gangrenous, things are bleak. And it doesn't help that at that very moment, the German army is sweeping successfully and rapidly across much of the rest of Poland. Still, the day ends with the Poles here still holding Westerplatte. Well, day 7 arrives, September 7th, and the Germans come in with flamethrowers. Of course, the bombardment continues as well, and this combination is too much for the Poles. Clearly, no reinforcements are coming. And so this is the day that they surrender. The Poles here at Westerplatte had withstood 13 assaults by land, sea, and air over 7 days. Pretty incredible. Well, the next day, the 8th, the German war flag was raised over Westerplatte. Adolf Hitler personally visited Westerplatte less than 2 weeks later, inspecting the site where thousands of Germans had taken part in the assault, either directly or indirectly, against just 200 Polish defenders, where 50 of those Germans had lost their lives compared to just 14 Polish dead, where 150 or so of those Germans had been injured compared to just 40 Polish injured. There's a reason that the Poles considered the Battle of Westerplatte, the defense of Westerplatte, a great symbol of resistance to invasion. This was their Thermopylae. And to this day, by many Poles, is still considered their Thermopylae. And that catchphrase, Westerplatte broni się jeszcze, this is a catchphrase used throughout the war to inspire the Polish resistance. In any case, with the German bombardment of Westerplatte, World War II in Europe had begun. Thank you so much for watching to the end. I really appreciate that. If you want me to keep creating content like this, consider becoming my patron over on patreon.com. Also follow me on Instagram, where weekly I issue updates as well as a set of history challenges. A little more engagement there. It's a lot of fun. We'll see you there.